Everybody's talking about data mesh these days, but is anybody doing it yet? Well, the answer is yes. I talked to Graham Sterling of Saxo Bank about the work he's done there in the last few years to build out not just infrastructure, but really cultural change that puts data mesh into effect. Listen in on today's episode of Streaming Audio, a podcast about Kafka, Confluent, and the cloud. Hello and welcome to another episode of Streaming Audio. I am your host, Tim Berglund, and I am joined today by Graham Sterling. Graham is an architect at Saxo Bank. And Graham, you had a quote that I'm just looking in my notes here. Head of data platforms at Saxo Bank, a recovering architect now on the path to delivery. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks, Tim. Just glad to be on the show.
You bet. So we're going to talk about data mesh today, which is an increasingly hot topic. And you and Saxo are, you as an architect, recovering architect, Saxo as an organization, are some people who are doing this. But I always like to start by asking about you, particularly recovering architect on the way to delivery. I think we have some common sensibilities there. So what do you mean by that? Really, what do you do at Saxo?
Indeed. Well, I suppose I started out with a computer science degree a long time ago. I think largely motivated by the desire not to get a proper job. I continued in academia for some time within human-computer interaction of all things. And then I eventually moved into financial services, initially leaning towards integration and then data management. So I worked in a number of banks, both big and small. I joined Saxo Bank almost 3 years ago. Moving to Copenhagen was never part of the life plan, but it's been a great adventure thus far. I initially joined as an architect, but the lure of delivery was too great, I guess. So it's been quite refreshing, I suppose, not only to create the vision, but also to take a key role in actually the execution of it.
Actually building stuff.
Absolutely. There's nothing quite like building stuff, is there?
There really isn't. And I think to some degree that helps you escape what I call the non-coding architect anti-pattern. Which is sometimes a dangerous thing in large companies, right? You can get yourself detached from how to build things, and that's in an applied discipline like ours, that's potentially dangerous. So,
Indeed. Things are very easy at PowerPoint level, really, aren't they? I guess. Yeah.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of what I do, so I know. But at some point you need to write some code and make sure that things work in the real world.
Indeed.
Now, modernization, we talk about this catchphrase, application modernization, like it's a new thing. I mean, everybody is always in the process of modernizing some things in their stack, in their organization, even constrained. When I say everybody, in an IT sense, in a community of software developers who write programs to make businesses run. There's always old stuff, and we're always trying to make the old stuff better. So there's always modernization happening. And it seems like there are, in the last, I'd say 5 years, modernization has meant refactoring a monolith to microservices. It's been a synonym. And that's, in fact, when I hear Confluent salespeople say application modernization, that's just what they mean. And that's cool. Not a thing in the world wrong with that. Like, that needs to happen. But there's also, and I think this touches on what we're going to talk about today, there's analytics modernization. I think to some degree, and I don't have a background as a DBA, I have a background as a developer. But to some degree these days, just to say data warehouse and to refer to that legacy thing is kind of like saying monolith. It's big, it's brittle, it's slow in terms of latency. It's got this batch kind of way of running, and so there's also a program of modernizing that, and you've got a really neat story to tell there. So let me just kick you off. I mean, I want to frame it with that, but tell us your story. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I suppose one of the things that I learned from my tenure with a few of the big banks was that, I mean, really what they needed more than anything else was I hate to use this term, here's my architect coming through, but a data fabric that ultimately everyone could plug into in some shape or form. And this was particularly felt by those business processes which sat right at the end of the data supply chain. So liquidity risk is a very good example. Global banks have a regulatory requirement these days to determine whether they have enough liquid assets that can easily be converted into cash to fulfill their liabilities.
Yes. Some percentage of their assets have to be quote unquote liquid.
That's right. Obviously, we don't want to be too heavily reliant on mortgage-backed securities, for example. That wouldn't be a good thing, now, would it? But
it might go wrong.
No, it might go wrong. Absolutely. But the calculation, the actual calculation that those or that domain, for example, has to perform is actually pretty simple. It's a ratio at the end of the day. The real challenge for them is getting a hold of the data in a timely manner. Now, of course, the cost of trying to retrofit this within an existing organization, some of which have the GDP of a small country, is prohibitive. The organizational challenges, perhaps more than anything else, of getting everyone to agree on a way forward kind of makes this change really, really hard. And to be honest, that was one of the real appeals about joining Saxo. The management team had the appetite to put data at the center of the transformation agenda, but it was small enough that it felt as though there was a chance to do something revolutionary. So that was one of the big appeals. Now, you mentioned, of course, the industry trend away from monoliths. And of course, we know that monoliths are not necessarily a bad thing towards microservices. And this whole idea of data mesh really follows those same parallels. And the real premise, I guess, is that the centralized enterprise data lake or data warehouse programs have failed to deliver the desired return on investment. Sure, they've allowed us to scale, data processing in a way that was previously unimaginable, but they haven't been accompanied with the cultural change, the operating model that allows us to generate value sustainably. And sustainable is probably the key word there. And I'm sure many of us have seen that happen over the years. And this is really where this concept of a data mesh, which of course, Zhamak talked about during a Kafka Summit, really comes into play.
And yeah, I should say, as we record this, we're just almost a week after Kafka Summit Europe with Zhamak Dehghani, who gave a keynote on data mesh. She's kind of a leading thinker. As far as I know, she's the one who's really created the term and is driving the conversation forward. So we'll definitely link to her keynote in the show notes. After you're done listening to me and Graham, you should absolutely watch her talk for a good primer on what data mesh means. And it's an early enough concept that pithy little explanations like the one I'm about to give are not helpful, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's doing to data what microservices did to applications. And I mean, that doesn't, then you're like, well, I know what a data warehouse is. I still don't know what a data mesh is. It's okay. Listen to Graham. We're going to get there. But that really is the analogy. And Graham, you said another thing that I want to have the courage to repeat with respect to friends who work in this business. But you said that the data lake has failed. You had some qualifications in there. You didn't just say it that directly, but has failed to deliver the value that we wanted it to deliver.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And if we think about how, and it's not, again, it's not the technology, perhaps, it's the way we've actually gone about delivering change, how we've tackled the build of an enterprise data warehouse in the past. Typically it would be staffed by a relatively large team which is responsible for ingesting, cleansing, transforming the data into a form that's useful for the business. And typically, the team would sit outside the actual data domains, I guess, to use one of those important tenets from
Right.
data mesh. So the team would typically be charged with going out to the far corners of the organization, speaking to the domain teams, trying to figure out what data was on offer and how to go about getting a hold of it. And obviously, to complicate matters, each system probably has grown up with their own unique way of serving up data, file extracts, services, message queues, data marts, design decisions that would typically have been a result of the expertise in the team or a
Yes.
consequence of the products they supported.
Spreadsheets in SharePoint.
Yeah.
Any sort of horror that one might imagine. And that, I mean, look, that worked. It was better than it not existing. But there was a centralized team that were specialists in data warehousing, and you said ingesting, cleansing, and transforming. And it's really the ingesting and the cleansing that were the bulk of the investment. The transforming is a crank that you turn by comparison. It's less labor intensive because ingesting and transforming or cleansing, every darn thing is so bespoke in the whole process and just kind of soul crushing.
Yeah. And the transformation is always going to be use case specific, typically, isn't it? Whether you need something, very flat and wide or in a star schema, is that piece in the puzzle, as you say, always sits with the consumer, typically.
Yeah. And I think what I heard you say, at least as I'm processing it, maybe the problem with data lake approaches was really saying to the organization, hey, look, you're doing business in some way. There's this emergent culture of this organization, or really federated group of organizations when it comes to a bank like Saxo. There's acquisitions and mergers, and there's a bunch of parts. Just keep doing that and dump things in this HDFS cluster or S3 buckets or whatever it is, cloud blob store, and some data scientists will do things later. That's probably a ruthlessly uncharitable account of the data lake, but it's not entirely wrong. And that lack of cultural change, I think I heard you say, was part of the problem, and why that approach we're saying now didn't deliver.
Indeed, yeah. And this whole idea of data mesh kind of, I suppose, turns that paradigm or that approach on its head by going back to those that fundamental concept of domain-driven design, which is not you, I suppose, but requiring each one of those data domains to serve their data sets in an easily consumable way. And then that leads on to so I suppose that then leads on to the next tenet, I guess, of data mesh, which is about product thinking, or the idea of convergence of data and product thinking. We've got this idea of data itself as a product. It's not like a necessary evil, essentially, that we have to move around just to fulfill a business requirement. It is something that we want to nurture and grow in its own right, and ultimately believe that the product's usability comes down to the ease with which it can be discovered, understood, and of course consumed. What's the time to market for consuming, spinning up a new use case, for example?
The very opposite of emitting data exhaust into a blob store.
Indeed, yes, yeah.
So how do you get there? I guess, do you consider yourself to have gotten there to some degree? And what's that process like? What's it been like over the last 3 years? How did you start?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we Zhamak's, I think, first paper came out about 2 years ago or thereabouts, and we were already starting to think about, well, how do we create a modern data architecture? One that we're going to be happy with in 10 years' time, that's going to meet the aspirations of the business in terms of the ability to easily tap into data and do more quicker, faster, but also very much with a view as to, well, how do we also scale the business? I mean, you mentioned shrinking batch windows earlier on, Tim. Mm-hmm. And Saxo is going through a huge growth curve at the moment, so we're planning for a 5 times increase in transactional volumes this year, 20 times within the course of the next 2 years. So we really needed to think about not only how do we do more quicker, faster with data, but how do we also scale? How do we reach organizational scale across the board? So that was the original premise, and the more that we started to think about this using the battle scars, the learnings of the past, the more we really started to resonate with this idea of data mesh, so to speak. So, I mean, it all seems pretty obvious, really, in many different ways. Just thinking about data in a product-centric way, but that's, of course, easier said than done, realistically, isn't it?
Yeah, for a number of reasons. One of which is that product thinking is now going to get driven to a smaller unit of the organization. So it's one thing when in the days of let's stand up a centralized data warehouse team. Well, then you just need one leader who has a vision for that. Like you need a Graham Sterling 30 years ago who just read this book by blanking on the name of there were the two big data warehouse gurus in the 90s. Anyway,
Kinman, Imble, that's the ones, eh?
Yeah, right. So I just read that book and I have a vision for this and I want to go drive this, and you build a prototype and you get some executive buy-ins, but you build a team.
Uh-huh.
You build a team. And if you're good at it, it becomes a big team and it has a big engine that it runs. But now you as that leader can sort of drive that in your little world. But that's inverted in data mesh. It's not one team that's doing all the building and needs all the leadership. It's every team that does every little thing in the business now needs this sort of data as product paradigm shift and worldview that they need to drink down.
Absolutely, because
So
you're
that
right.
sounds hard.
It is, because obviously the advantage of having a central team is that it's a lot easier, really, isn't it, to maintain standards, technical expertise. It's from that perspective, it's much easier. Now, as soon as you devolve the responsibility of teams taking on the ownership for these data products and the responsibility of publishing those data assets to your data fabric, for want of a better word. You either need to onboard a lot of technical expertise to the domain teams, or you've really got to focus on how do you lower that barrier of entry to the platform. And I think the latter really is key to sustainable growth here.
Right.
So that domain teams, because their focus should really be about delivering business change. I guess that's why they're in the bank. That's why they're paid, rather than worrying about how to ensure your schema is compatible, how to generate code bindings. What's the approach for dealing with personally identifiable information, so on and so forth. There's a big long list of non-functional capabilities. And in this context, the self-service platform has to move beyond pure play infrastructure to one that's really focused on enabling those domain teams to publish and, of course, consume data assets the right way.
Right. So it's not just we have a Confluent Cloud account and you can put things in topics, but you're really talking about, I would say, API level tools that you're delivering to teams on the very tactical level.
Indeed,
and
yes.
Then this product thinking, which is much more strategic, much more higher level kind of thinking.
Yes. And obviously, in our case here, it's Confluence sits at the core of this foundational level just now. I mean, at this point in time, we run our own self-managed cluster on premise and in the cloud. But theoretically, at the point we switch over to the fully managed service, that should be largely transparent to the actual domain teams. Theoretically,
love it. Yeah, you notice I just work Confluent Cloud in there, even though you're not the user. Like, well, I mean, obviously, assuming you'd be a Confluent Cloud. Don't let this guy get away with that. And so in the work that you've done, it's not as though the need for technology leadership goes away. I think honestly, it gets a little more demanding, because in the build a central team, well, you just have to be able to build a team, and that's hard. But a lot of people can do that. In what you've done, maybe there's a central team. There's some API layer stuff that somebody's building. You talked about your passion for delivery. You're building things. There's a Kafka cluster somewhere that somebody's running. Like, all those things exist. But now also you have to convince people of ideas. and it's everybody in every team and every business unit.
Yes.
And that, what's that been like?
That's it's incredibly difficult, actually, so to speak, Tim. I think it's really
sounds like my job.
Really a challenge. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is definitely an advocacy element to the role as well. But we're always having to look for, where are we causing friction, I guess, within the organisation. How do we remove that friction and make things easier for our development community? Because we are very much pitching this as a bank-wide capability, from the point of, trade capture right through to regulatory reporting. So the ambitions are huge. And of course, we've set ourselves up as a self-service team, so the requirements are coming thick and fast from the actual domain team. So it's always about trying to stay, one step ahead of the game. But I think that has definitely been one of the biggest lessons to date, is that, we're talking about adoption of Kafka, event-first thinking, self-describing schemas, data ownership, so on and so forth. It's quite a big ask of our domain teams. And to a certain extent, it doesn't matter how much effort you put into that self-service platform, and we'll continue to do so. We've got lots of documentation, probably too much. But for the level of adoption that we're looking to achieve, we've ended up creating a team separate from the platform team who are solely concerned with enablement. So I guess we've got the platform team, which is, and this was actually an idea which Zhamak had talked about in terms of how to get this thing off the ground. So, for example, got a small team. We run like a sort of daily office hours session, so open door, any question, any blocker, come along and we'll do our best to answer it on the call or take it away. We're creating accelerators that will remove the mystic of developing and deploying stream processors. So this allows the platform team to focus on let's say, the bigger ticket items without being distracted by what might seem to them, small issues. But each of these small issues, can block a delivery, can act as a drag on adoption. And for those strategic data domains, or the domains which have, many applications across the bank, like instrument, for example, I guess, then we offer teams the option of pairing up with a tech SME to get them started, perhaps for like a couple of sprints, I guess, to get them up and running and off the ground.
That sounds ideal. So that central team, yes, there's an infrastructure concern. Yes, there are, we'll just call them API concerns. Everybody's got a wrapper in a big organization that they use to get people to put stuff into Kafka at a low level. But it really is about teaching people.
It's about teaching people, absolutely. So ultimately, we want to allow teams to get started and publish their assets and help move us forward. But we also want them to, eventually to become advocates in their own right, essentially. So the demands on that central enablement team go, and we can essentially just replace that with a community of practice type idea.
Graham, before we started this conversation, I didn't see the relationship between data mesh and developer advocacy, and now I do. That's great. That makes a lot of sense.
But it is looking out for all those, as I say, those points of friction. Now, one that we, I've talked with many of the folks at Confluent over the past was, initially we'd selected Avro as a serialization format because that was the thing that you did. But we soon found that all language bindings are not necessarily created equally, and the C# implementation was giving us a bit of a headache. And the C#, I guess, is the predominant language of choice within the bank. It's getting more varied now, I think. We're moving into Python and the such like, but a our bread and butter is within C#.
Yeah, and not you're not alone as a financial institution at all.
So when you introduced protobuf support, we decided to bite that bullet and switch over. Again, not being without its challenges, but it's all about thinking, how can we how can we flex the platform, I guess? What can we do to make the life easier of our development community?
Absolutely. What's next in this program? I started to call it a project, but it's bigger than a project. In this season of your career and of the evolution of Saxo's data architecture, what are you looking to do to move it forward?
Well, I think there's a lot that we can do in terms of. So we rely heavily on this concept of operations by pull request. So if you want to create a new topic, you set up a topic definition, you get the PR approved, topic gets deployed. Same for connectors and schemas and even data quality rules, for example. Now, certainly one area that we know we can improve that developer experience is by giving users a much more transparent or a clearer view as to why, for example, their schema might be failing with compatibility. A change, it might be causing a break in compatibility rules. So there's some obvious examples, some fairly low-hanging fruit, I guess, that we can address that will, again, remove those points of friction. But we really want to get to the point whereby, as I say, it's all down to the critical mass of data adoption within the bank, and we hopefully will soon turn our attention to, how do we start to exploit this data in a more meaningful way. For example, using KSQL DB looks very interesting. I guess it's been on the roadmap for some time, as is something like Druid, I think, for real-time aggregation. There's a number of use cases where that would fit into play. So there's lots for us to do. Realistically, I don't think we're going to get bored for any time soon.
My guest today has been Graham Sterling. Graham, thanks for being a part of Streaming Audio.
Not at all. Thank you, Tim.
And there you have it. Thanks for listening to this episode. Now, some important details before you go. Streaming Audio is brought to you by Confluent Developer. That's developer.confluent.io, a website dedicated to helping you learn Kafka, Confluent, and everything in the broader event streaming ecosystem. We've got free video courses, a library of event-driven architecture design patterns, executable tutorials covering KSQLDB, Kafka streams, and core Kafka APIs. There's even an index of episodes of this podcast. So if you take a course on Confluent Developer, you'll have the chance to use Confluent Cloud. When you sign up, use the code PODCAST100 to get an extra $100 of free Confluent Cloud usage. Anyway, as always, I hope this podcast was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, you can always reach out to me at tlberglund on Twitter. That's TLBERGLUND. Or you can leave a comment on the YouTube video if you're watching and not just listening, or reach out in our community Slack or forum. Both are linked in the show notes. And while you're at it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and to this podcast wherever fine podcasts are sold. And if you subscribe through Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover us, which we think is a good thing. So, thanks for your support, and we'll see you next time.